Hey everyone, it's time again to recap the latest news from the solar PV industry compiled by the American Solar Energy Society. I'm Jay Warmke with SolarPVTraining.com, and this is what's happening in the wonderful world of solar for the week of April 20th. Well, solar and wind accounted for almost 98% of the new U.S. electrical generation capacity added to the grid during the months of January and February of this year, according to data from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC. Solar accounted for nearly 3/4 of all the new capacity this year so far. For the first 2 months of the year, solar accounted for 73.3% of new capacity. Wind made up 24.3%, and natural gas only 2.3% of new generating capacity. Solar has now been the largest source of new generating capacity added to the grid each month for the last 18 consecutive months, all the way back to September of 2023. But a significant amount of the solar capacity is not reflected in these numbers. Approximately 30% of U.S. solar capacity is in the form of small-scale systems that's not reflected in FERC's data. These are systems installed on homes and businesses by the owners of those buildings. FERC's numbers only include utility-scale systems. Including that additional solar capacity, that would bring the share provided by wind and solar to more than 1/4 of the nation's total. And with the inclusion of hydropower and biomass and geothermal, renewables account for about 31.5% of the total U.S. utility scale generating capacity. And if small scale solar is added, then renewables jump to a little over 1/3 of the U.S. generating capacity. Now, to put those numbers into perspective, 10 years ago, renewables only provided about 16.9% of the nation's power, with more than half of that coming from hydro. Over the past decade, essentially, renewables' share of U.S. generating capacity has about doubled. As adoption of renewable energy dramatically changed the grid, utilities are starting to fight back through legislative and regulatory measures that are designed to slow or stop the transition to distributed energy. Utility Idaho Power currently pays homeowners around 8.8 cents for every kilowatt hour that they net meter or send back to the grid. The utility then charges customers about 10.82 cents for every kilowatt that they buy from the grid. The utility has recently asked the Idaho Public Utilities Commission to reset these rates, dropping the price paid for net metered electricity down to by 70% to about 2.46 cents per kilowatt hour. This request is the latest in a number of similar type actions made by utilities across the country. Utilities claim that they should not be asked to pay essentially retail for power coming back from the customers, that they only want to pay them wholesale rates. Well, advocates for solar will maintain that the utilities do not have to pay for transmission or distribution charges on this net metered, which make up about 2/3 of the cost of electricity. Plus, the energy that is supplied by solar systems comes during the time of day when peak energy demand is present, and it generally costs utilities more to purchase at the wholesale level energy during those periods of time. This move comes on top of unpopular hikes that Idaho Power instituted in January of this year to their monthly fixed fee when they raised those from $5 to $15 per month. The Texas Senate voted 22-9 to pass Senate Bill 819. The bill places restrictions on wind and solar projects, requiring new permits, assessing certain fees on these projects, adding new regulatory requirements, and placing new taxes on the projects. The legislation, quote, adds onerous requirements to new solar projects that would not apply to other energy sources except for wind, according to the Solar Energy Industries Association, or CEA. Texas has the nation's largest utility-scale solar market. It's a $50 industry with enough solar to power as many as 5 million homes. The bill's expected to slow development, raise Texans' utility bills, harm rural economies, worsen grid reliabilities, and encroach on private property rights. All this according to CEA. The solar industry currently employs about 12,000 people in Texas. It's expected to add the most solar among all states over the next 5 years, with a projected growth of around 41 gigawatts of capacity. The bill next heads to the Texas House of Representatives for a vote. If it passes, then it will go to Governor Greg Abbott's desk for his signature. But the battle over renewable energy at the state level is not all gloom and doom for the solar industry. The Montana legislature last week approved a bill to boost private community solar projects within that state. Shared solar projects are gaining momentum across the country, with more than 44 states offering these programs. Montana will join the effort by installing community solar projects within the state's 9 rural electric co-ops. The bill passed both chambers with overwhelming bipartisan support in a final vote of 46-4 during the Senate hearing during the weekend. In both the Senate and the House hearings, dozens of groups and individuals testified in favor of this measure, while the utilities, Northwestern Energy and Montana Dakota Utilities, both of the major utilities in the state, opposed the bill. Uncertainty regarding tariffs, particularly on imported energy, may cause nations to look towards developing their own energy sources, and these sources are increasingly wind and solar. Now, this all is according to a recent assessment by Ember, which is a London-based energy think tank. The analysis contends that in the short term, tariffs on solar panels and components may actually slow industry development. But in the long term, it will accelerate the transition towards renewable energy away from fossil fuels that are increasingly vulnerable to the uncertainties of trade politics. Now, Ember argues that since most countries do not have plentiful oil and gas within their borders, they need to import it, and in order to do so, they have to have confidence in the stability of their supply and the pricing of that supply. Now, as this confidence erodes, they'll look for alternatives, and while they don't also generally have the capacity of manufacturing their own solar panels or other components, they will inevitably import these, because once this system is installed, then they have a reliable source of energy for up to 30 years, where they will not be dependent upon daily shipments of fuel. And that's the news from the solar industry for this week. We'll see you next week.